Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about Stop the Insanity. So, those of you who have been fans and friends here for a couple of years know that I think we launched it 3 years ago, maybe, but the idea of Stop the Insanity was stop the insanity of every time you want to make a garment buying a new pattern. It isn't necessary. There's a lot of things you can do once you get a pattern to fit you, and some of us have more trouble than others, but there's always some things that we want to do: shorten, lengthen, proportions, full bust adjustments, rounded back, whatever it might be, all these things. Then it seems like a daunting task to start all over again. But we show you in our Stop the Insanity series on YouTube in the playlist how to make many changes to this and using the same pattern and getting many different looks. So, in other words, if you have a nice fitting shirt bodice and you really like it, you like the way it goes together and it fits you well, you can change that 99 different ways. And we're going to show you today one of the ways you can change it that we did not show you in the original Stop the Insanity series. And that is how to change a button-up shirt pattern. So all of what we were talking about was starting with the button-up shirt pattern and turn it into a pattern that has no placket, just a facing and a convertible collar instead of a collar with a stand. What's really nice about that is those shirts are a more casual look. They're more relaxed and they take a lot less time to sew up. So I'm going to show you real quick right here some of the camp shirts that I've made from the same pattern. So all of the shirts you see up here were made from the same pattern. Now this is the men's shirt, so not this one, but all of these, including the one I'm wearing, all made from the same pattern. So I started with, well, mine's kind of a hybrid, but I started with 1301, which is a sloper pattern. And I also use the everybody's shirt because I like the process of the placket. It's a real slick process. So, anyways, I started with my shirt pattern and changed things. It's a button-up short sleeve. Here is that striped shirt with the kimono sleeve. Another button-up with the two-piece collar, and then the one I have on is made out of a lightweight rayon, and I widened the sleeves to give it a little different look. And then the one we're going to be talking about today, again from the same pattern, is this convertible collar. So if there are any questions before I get started, let's go there. And otherwise, Jess, I'm going to move over to my area and get ready for the demonstration. Okay, I'm going to be a little squeaky.
Wow, I'm gonna be a little close. All right, we're gonna just gonna move over to the other side of the table to do the demonstration. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the comment box now, and we'll get them answered before she gets started. But as always, if you have a question as we go along, throw it out there. So we want to make sure everybody's understanding. All right, so I'm gonna turn you guys around. See what we are. Sorry. Working.
Okay, so for those of you who have Pattern Making Made Easy, the drafting book by Connie Crawford, this information is taken from page 122. So what we're going to do is we've taken, this is what our button up pattern with a placket looks like. This one would have a two-piece collar, which would be the collar stand plus the collar. So I've traced this out on this piece of paper here. up to the center front line.
Let's move that closer.
This one?
Yep. If that's what you're going to be working on.
Yes. All right, so you can see again, this one, of course, has the center front line, that red dashed line here. And then it has the fold lines to create the placket. So, but we don't need those because we're not going to have a placket. So just trace your front out right up to the center front line.
All right, Janet, I have a good question
Okay.
before you get started. So that people can follow along here. They're wondering if you could define the different collars. Like, what is a convertible collar?
Okay. So a two-piece collar is a collar like you see on what I'm wearing. So it has a collar stand, and then there's a collar inserted between the two stands. Okay, that's your basic button up. And that is the traditional design of what we would call a button up. But in today's world, anything goes and people make up new terms, and makes me a little cuckoo, but that is a traditional button up. Now, a shirt like you've seen our Islander shirt or this particular shirt here, can they see that?
Now,
All right. So this is called a rolled collar because this collar doesn't have a stand. So it rolls back on itself. And it is, and you're going to see this in a few minutes after I get done. This is one of those days where all right. So I'm going to show you how this whole thing is constructed. So I'm not going to go into that right now, but you can see it's just a folded back front and an open collar. Just a real casual look. A lot of camp shirts are like that. Tommy Bahama does his shirts like that. And of course, our men's Islander shirt is a convertible collar. And I'm going to do a demo on how to change the front so that it's just a facing. Then I'm going to do a demo on how to actually draft that collar for yourself. Then I'll show you how it's constructed. Okay? So we're going to start out with how to change the front. So we've taken our original front, and it doesn't matter if it's the left or the right because we're only going to trace it up to the center front line. Very important line on any pattern. So we're going to trace it up to the center front line. And all the information for this particular demonstration can be found on page 122 in Pattern Making Made Easy by Connie Crawford. So I traced out my pattern up to the center front. Now I have to know what size button am I going to use? And then I'm going to add 1/8 inch to that. So I know in this particular case, I'm using a 5/8 inch button. 5/8 inch button plus 1/8 is 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to come out here 3/4 of an inch and draw a parallel line. That's going to be the fold line. And you should always label these things. So this is our fold line. Okay? So again, the distance between the center front and the fold line is the size of the button you're going to use plus 1/8 inch. So you can imagine it's going to be very different between a 1/2 inch button and a 1 inch button. But this is the size button I'm using is 5/8. So I've added 1/8 to 5/8, which is 3/4. I've extended to 3/4. Now, the paper will very likely want to fold right on that inked line. So you're going to fold it, and then you have two choices. Keeping it folded well, you can cut along this line, okay? And then unfold it. Or if you can see through the paper, which I can, you can trace the line on the other side of the paper. Okay, there it is. And just keep that shoulder line in there straight. Okay. All right. So as you can see now, we've extended that. And I'm sure you've made patterns. This is what we're about to do. We're going to create this facing right here. Let me put this down. So we're creating this extension right here. See the fold line? And just as before, and then it's unfolded. Now to get this shape, we want about 2.5 inches. And you can go over or under that by 1/4 inch without any issue. So I'm going to go 2.5 here and draw that out. Now this is going to be my facing. And from the fold line over on the facing is what you interface. Right? So we're going to connect these. 2.5. Oh, you. All right. Now, when we get up here, we only want to go 2.5 from the neckline. And to keep this curve going, just keep marking 2.5 inches from the neckline on the curve so that you get this nice rounded until, well, you could go all the way over here and then see how much of it you need. So now I'm going to follow that curve around, and we could trace that, or if you have an arm side tool, oh, here's mine. A curve, a French curve, whatever, you could actually get a little support from the curve. Okay, and then this is got to connect to this. So we're just going to make a little curve here. There we go. Nothing too sharp because you want this to be nice and smooth. So make sure it stays nice and smooth. I'm going to turn this back around for you, Jess. So there we have it. Again, the fold line is the extension button plus 1/8 inch. Then this is our facing. We're going to interface from here to here. We're going to turn this raw edge back or finish it in some way. I like turning it under 1/4 and this under 1/4. All right. So that is all you need to do to change it from a placket to a what's called a cut-on facing. In some cases, if you ever want to do a sew-on facing, then this is your stitching line. You'll add 1/4 inch to this. You'll create your sew-on facing and add 1/4 inch to that, and you'll sew the two together. And the only time you'd want to do that is if your fabric wasn't wide enough or if you wanted your facing in some kind of contrasting fabric. So that is our cut-on facing. Okay, do we have any questions before I go on to the collar?
I don't have any yet, but if anybody has any, I'm still taking it in. Put them in the comments.
I will say while we're waiting, it's so important to keep everything perpendicular. Keep everything nice and straight because this is your straight of grain, that center front line. So make sure that you measure accurately to draw that line very straight. So the next thing I want to do is the collar. I don't know, is it okay to go ahead and move on to the collar, Jessica?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so for a collar, and you might think, oh my gosh, is she crazy? This is very, very simple to do, this particular collar. The first thing you're going to want to do is measure the neckline of your front and back and make a note of it. So as you can see, I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I marked a 1/4 inch from the cut edge, and then I measured it from the center front to the seam allowance at the shoulder. That is the measurement you need for your neck edge for the front. And then you do the same thing with the back. And just make a note of those because you're going to need those for your collar. Okay, so then you'll need to take a piece of paper, I say maybe 8 inches wide by 22 inches long, and then fold it in half this way. And I have marked a dark line on this right here because that's going to be the center of our collar or the center fold line of our collar. Use a shorter one. All right, and I want to tell you what page this is on in the book. And before we get started, let's see. Chapter 14, page 207. And just so you don't worry at all, I've prepared this PDF, which gives you all the instructions I'm just about to demonstrate, and you'll be able to download this for free from our website. So this is pretty much what is on the page in the pattern book, but I've added a little more detail for those of you who have never drafted before. All right, so we need to draw a perpendicular line to our center. So be sure again to be very precise with your it being perpendicular. The first measurement we're going to need is that back neck measurement. So back neck measurement. And we know, or I know, is 4 1/8. So I'm going to come here and mark this at 4 1/8. What I've just done is created the notch for the shoulder. So that is the shoulder notch. Now we're going to come forward on that line and do the front neck edge. And our front neck edge we know is 5 1/8. So we're going to come to 5 1/8. And this is center front right here, where you end um front the front neck. Okay. All right. So then the next step is, let's see where we're at. Okay. Um, all right, we got the shoulder. Yes, we want to call this center front, we want to call this shoulder, and we want to call this center back fold. And these things are very important to label. So be sure you do that. Then we want to decide how wide do we want our collar. And there's lots of ways, but basically find a collar that you like in a garment that you like that's current, and maybe measure the finished width of that. Now, this is no seam allowances yet, so whatever the finished width is. And let's see, I think I chose maybe 2. So I did 2 inches. So I drew a 2 inch from that neckline. And again, keep it nice and square. So that's the width of my collar. Then I'm going to come up a half an inch above the collar at center front. So let's draw that center front all the way up. And what you'll notice with me is that I draw the line longer than it needs to be sometimes, but that doesn't matter because we're going to cut it off anyway. So what we want to do is come up a half an inch, make a mark a half an inch above center front. So we'll go half an inch here, and then we need a half an inch here. Okay. All right. So now we're going to draw a line along the top of our collar that comes up and intersects with that mark. So let me see. I think I'll use this because there's a slight curve to it in most cases. So let me put this so that you can see it really well what I'm doing here. So we know this is our shoulder here, and we want to blend it to the shoulder. So from that notch to the shoulder or just in front of the shoulder line is what we want. So I think that's probably pretty good right there. So then again, this is that half inch above our squared line. And then we're going to do the same thing down here. Sorry. At the neckline going up to that half inch mark. Let's see. All right, that looks good. It has to blend right in even. So what I want you to notice is that these lines no longer exist. This line no longer exists. This is our collar. Now, how far we extend the collar past center front, remember this is center front, is how large or long or big those points are on our collar. Currently, they're pretty short. So what I did was I made mine pretty, not very sharp of a angle. So you can come up. Now, a traditional one might come all the way out here. But I like a little bit more like this. Not too much of a point on the collar. And then I can just connect this up. And this is my collar. What it needs right now is added seam allowance and a straight of the grain line. Well, the straight of the grain will be parallel to this neckline. So we can draw that in. And then oftentimes a collar is cut in the opposite direction. So you would just make a perpendicular to this one to get that. You could also do your 45-degree to get a bias collar. So this is our collar, and these lines don't exist anymore. They were just our working lines. So you're going to come up with, this was my first working one for the shirt that's right here. So here it is, and then I've added the seam allowance. So I only add a quarter. You don't need any more than a quarter on a collar. And then I keep this in the envelope, and I don't cut this out. I don't use it. This is my master copy. Then on a clean sheet of paper, I make my collar, remembering to label it for what it's for and what the seam allowance is, and don't forget your notch. And that's all there is to making a convertible collar to fit the neckline of the pattern that you already have. Okay, let's see, Jessica, if we have any questions. I'll leave everything right here in case we do.
I do this time.
All right.
I just have to read them. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, so Joni is not specifically about the collar, but
Mm.
is wondering What do you do to keep your rulers from sliding when you're measuring?
There's a product. I don't have the. Oh, yes, I do. Oh, you are a luck girl. They're called grip strips. Guidelines for Quilting is the brand. How am I doing?
Just hold it still.
It's about as still as I can get. I can put it on the
No,
table.
you're good. Well, well, it showed there for a second.
Okay, I got it.
Oh, lordy, lordy. Yep, you're good.
Okay, so these things have like they're like on a double-sided tape. And when you pull them off, you stitch them to the outside edge of the wrong side of your ruler. So I don't know. Can they see that?
Probably not because it's clear.
Yeah, but these things are, if it's close enough, I think they can see it. But yeah, you can't see them. But oh my gosh, they made a huge difference, especially for really slick fabrics. It just, your ruler was moving all over the place.
This way.
Ah, there you go. Can you see them though?
Well,
Yeah.
the camera.
Well, they're just slightly less than a quarter of an inch wide, and they're about an eighth of an inch thick. And I glued these on with, from that package, I think 10 years ago. And so this is a product that really worked and lasts.
Okay, another question. If you use, for example, a 2-inch ruler, if you lay it down and draw on both sides and you end up with a fraction more than 2 inches, do you account for this or try to remove it?
No. Here's the thing. If you're drawing around a 2-inch ruler and you're making this collar, the 32nd of an inch or the 16th of an inch bigger that it is isn't going to make any difference because the width doesn't fit to anything. When you're drafting a piece that has to be sewn to another piece, then it has to be quite precise. But still, we usually throw the 30 seconds out the window, and the 16ths aren't all that important either. So I wouldn't be overly concerned. Just try to be as precise as you can. Always strive for excellence, but leave perfection to the gods. All right. Any other questions? Excellent. That means you all get it. And you're going to make convertible collar striped shirts by the end of the month. All right. I want to show you the convertible collar. Now, I've made these on and off over many years. Back when I used to purchase patterns, it's not a new concept. But one time, quite a few years ago, I had a woman write me and she could not figure it out, even with the video instructions. And she claims she's been sewing for 45 years. And I'm thinking, I just don't think it's that mysterious. But just in case, because it's new to some people, I left this undone so I could show you. All right, so you remember our facing, our cut on facing. This was the fold line. Okay, so it's been folded back. Now what I did is you put the collar in here and base the collar in place before you fold that back. It's the only thing that you can't see at this point, but yeah. Let me do it this way. All right. So I lay the collar on the neckline without the facing first and just baste it. What's the collar? Yeah. All right. Just baste it onto the neckline. There's just one thing that's very key with this kind of a collar. At that shoulder notch, this top collar has to be clipped to the stitching line on both of those notches. All right, let me put it this way, make sure the orientation makes sense to you. So once I had that basted on there, and this is clipped, I folded my facings back and I stitch around the collar, leaving this side of the collar free. So those clips, I hope that's clear. Right up to the shoulder, both sides of the collar are sewn to the neckline. But after the facing, only one side. That's because when we're done, and this whole thing gets top stitched, so this is really slick. And we do this in the Islander shirt too. So we're going to start at the bottom and we're going to top stitch all the way around that facing. We're going to come across this neckline, top stitching needle width away so that it nails it down. If you stitch too far over here, it'll keep this facing from flipping around, but it won't give you that nice, clean, sharp neckline. So try to stitch that needle width away there. But then when you get here, your seam allowance will have been pressed up and you'll turn this under 1/4 inch so that you have a clean neckline and continue top stitching across that folded under edge. Coming across here, doing the same and going all the way around. So not only do you get all that top stitching done at the same time without having to take it in and out, you also clean finish your neckline. And now that whole business is done. A lot faster than putting a collar stand and a collar and making two plackets. So not only is this a casual and fun shirt to wear, it's a lot faster to make. Now, all of those instructions, you'll find them in the Islander shirt. I think that's our only convertible collar pattern at this point. I want to talk about the convertible collar that has a built-in collar stand. So if you can see this collar here, this is the one when we did our demonstration on Tuesdays at 2 on how to create a convertible collar out of a shirt that has a placket and a button-up placket on it. This way, there's no placket, it's just a self-facing. There's no collar stand, so it goes together really quickly. And and it's just a nice casual look. So that's what we did. Well, you'll see it on YouTube. It's on YouTube. I don't know if it was the last month, right? I think it was last month. So anyway, in the meantime, we had Eve or Ev, it's EV, she signs her name. So she asked for a specific type of collar. And if you saw the newsletter, you know what type of collar we're talking about. But what we're talking about is a collar that has a collar stand within the collar. So if you will, take a look at this. So this is a convertible collar from a coat that Brenda and I drafted a couple years ago. And what you have here is an interfaced collar stand. So we've put interfacing on the inside, and then this acts as a collar stand to keep the collar up nice. Now this has one in it, so I want you to kind of see how nice that stands up there. And it's got real nice sculpture and shape. So it's always going to stand up. It's not going to fall down. And a lot of ladies feel it almost gives them a facelift when the collar stays up in the back nice and high like that. It just gives a nice contour to the face. And it allows these collar to just uh, curl a little bit more. It's just a little different look. So either one's acceptable, but we had the request for this one and we thought it'd be fun to add it to your uh, camp shirt conversion, if you will, that we did. So let's get started with how easy this is. So I took the collar from this shirt and traced it. Now we know we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance in a collar. You need this closer or can you see it really well? Let me turn it this way. Okay. We know we're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around here. So we're going to have our collar stand, if you will. I'll show you again right next to this one. We want this stand to end just above the stitching. So we don't want it caught in the stitching. So I've made a placement line 3/8 of an inch above the cut edge. So that's 1/8 inch clearance between the stitching line and your stand. So if you can be very precise with that, this will work fabulous. So take your collar and go 1/8 above the stitching line, which is in this case 3/8. And then for the average size collar, I would say you want to go about 1 1/4 inches past the shoulder notch. So I've done that at both sides. The one I have here is a plus size, and it's 1 3/8 past the shoulder mark, just because it's just a little bit bigger. So you can kind of play with those, but uh, an eighth one way or the other isn't going to make a big difference. Okay. So then the next thing you want to know is where is the center of my collar? Because that's where you want the center vertically. Because the collar is going to fold back, and I want my stand to be right there where it can fold back. So now you'll come above this placement line that you drew to that specific mark. In my case, it's 3/4 of an inch. And this stays nice and straight. And then you have to curve down to just where we made that mark of 1 1/4 inch past the shoulder. Now you might say, oh, I'm not really good at being making a smooth curve or something. So here's what I did. I just took a collar stand or a piece that was shaped similarly, and I used it by laying it against this line where I wanted, and I just traced it. And then I can turn it over and trace it on this side. Even though this is deeper than I need, all I want to do is get that nice curve right here. That's all I'm using this for. Okay, so now we know this is the center of our collar. It's the top of our collar stand. This is our placement line, so that's the bottom of our collar stand. So now all you need to do is take a piece of paper and trace this out of the collar. Trace it so that, and then label it. So I trace that and then cut it out. Everything should be labeled as always. You know, when you make your own pattern pieces, it's really easy to get lazy. But 2 months from now, when you find that piece and you don't know what it goes to, you'll be sorry. So be sure to label them. We're going to cut 2 of this interfacing. All right. So that's how you determine the shape and size and position of that collar stand. Let's see if there are any questions before I go to uh, the final step. Make sure everybody's with me on that one.
Rhymes with Bev. That's who wrote it.
Ev, okay. Hi, Ev. Thanks for the question. This was a perfect idea to bring this forward. It's a great solution for a collar to give it a little more integrity. sometimes collars like we have on the convertible collar, depending on the fabric and the amount of times it's been laundered, will end up falling very flat and not have any stand back there at all. So this is excellent to put into your collars. All right. Well, then, Brenda, we're going to just talk about setting it on the placement line. And I'll show you the one piece. Now you're going to do two. Both of your collar pieces, you will mark the center, the shoulder mark, and then the distance of 1 1/4 past the shoulder mark, somewhere between 1 1/4 and 1 3/8. If you happen to be a very petite person, you may even have to bring that down a little bit more to 1 or 1 1/8. Okay, so we had that all marked and we drew that marking from our pattern right onto the interfacing. This is what I love about interface pieces because they're easy to mark. All right, so you're going to do that to both sides of your collar. You're going to interface your collar the way you would have per the fabric. So in the lawn, we only use the light and stable, but we use it on both sides. In a poplin or regular shirting cotton, I would probably use the medium shirt makers on one side of the collar and the light and stable on the collar facing. But in any case, whatever you decide to do, this is the piece that has to be firm. Unless you're working with an extremely fine silk, which I can't imagine why you'd want this kind of a collar in it, but you want to use a stiff interfacing. Now, this is the kind of interfacing they use in tuxedo shirts, in those collars that men want really stiff and starchy. This is the kind of interfacing, and we carry it. It's called Shirt Makers Firm. So this is the firmest, and you can really see how stiff it is just by the way I handle it. You can see that it holds its shape. It takes a lot of heat and a lot of steam. So if your iron doesn't steam a lot, you might want to use a press cloth with some moisture on it, but you want a lot of heat. This is a heavier fiber, heavier textile. It is a woven cotton interfacing, which is the best to use in shirting, by the way. But because it is a denser, getting through that and the glue side with the heat and steam takes more work than most interfacings. So I just wanted you to be prepared for that. And then the final thing you're going to do before you assemble your collar is edge stitch all the way around, all sides, all the way around. I start down here. And do you see how close that is on the edge stitching? Now I'm not sure.
Let me hold it up.
I'm not sure, but I'll turn it over. But it's right on the edge, ladies, right on the edge. But you do want to catch that edge. And then this is what it looks like on the right side. I'm just going to set that down. And again, then once you have your collar assembled, this one's not top stitched yet. Always top stitch your collars. Then you'll have that beautiful stand that will just automatically make your collar just sit so beautifully. You don't ever have to worry about putting any starch or sizing or anything on there. It's just going to sit nice. But again, the most important thing to remember as you create this piece is that it not get caught in that stitching. But you don't want it like 1/8 of an inch above the stitching because then you're going to create a weak joint. And that's not going to give you the best collar. So that is a precise place. But if you place it at 3/8 and you stitch it 1/4, it'll be beautiful. Okay. So Brenda, check to see if there are any questions. And in the meantime, because now we're afraid our battery's going to run out.
Now,
Um,
someone asked, is it a zigzag stitch?
No.
Oh, repeat it.
Oh, no zigzag stitch. Someone is asking about zigzag. I don't use zigzag ever. unless I'm in a buttonhole. I have exciting news about my buttonholes too that I'll share next month. But no zigzag stitch, just a nice straight stitch. Now, for those of you who might be new, we construct garments with a 3 if you have that the newer all the more modern machines since 1950 or 60, I guess. Anyways, they had the metric, so it's a 3. Older machines was 11 to 12 stitches per inch. That's a perfect. But because so many people got excited about quilting is a 2 often. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a quilter. I've made a couple, but it's not my vocation. So then I find garment sewers stitching at a 2, no matter what fabric they're using, because they say, oh, I don't want it to tear out. Trust me, I've never sewn at a 2. I've always sewn at a 3 or larger, and I have never had a garment tear out ever. Even the shirts I make my husband, he doesn't manage to tear those either. So a 3 is fine. It'll give you a nice flat surface. It won't pull too tight. And with fashion fabrics, because we want them to drape and everything, getting too tight of a stitch is not a good idea. So about a 3. And you can see that it's a really just a nice clean stitch. Of course, you're not going to stitch it in white. I need to say that for anybody who's new. The only reason that I mark things or with a contrast or use a contrasting thread is so that you can see it on the camera and you're not straining to wonder what I'm talking about. So in essence, this is just a sample. This isn't going on a garment because if it was, you wouldn't be able to see that stitching very well at all because it would match the fabric. Okay. So make sure though that you label your pieces and keep them together. This is called the convertible collar, and this is the stand. No fabric, just interfacing for the stand. So you're going to write on here, cut 2 interfacing, cut 2 fabric, cut 2 interfacing for the collar. All right, a couple other things I wanted to mention. We had the camp shirt conversion challenge, and we haven't gotten it up yet, so we apologize. We went through what we thought was going to be a simple, well, we didn't think it was going to be real simple, but we wanted to get rid of the ridiculous hoard of things that I've collected over 3 careers in the sewing industry. So I had garments and fabrics and hand-dyed fabrics and more fabrics and notions. I just found another 20 or 30 stitch rippers. So many things came from my career of doing the sewing expo. So we had lots of notions because we had all kinds of activities where people were sewing. So, anyways, we had that. We thought that would be easy and we'd be back right on par, and we're not. We're still sorting and organizing. So we're a little behind, but we're going to get those out. Each one of the people who participated in the challenge will receive a $20 credit in their account by the end of this week. Let's see. If you need it before, just holler. We'll take care of it. Okay, today there is the sale that was in the newsletter. And it is a smashing sale, particularly considering the subject we're on, shirts. So I thought, hey, I'm going to do a really big doorbuster sale of 24% off anything to do with shirts. So that's shirt patterns, men's, women's, or youth. That's shirt kits, and that's shirting. So all of our shirting, which is 100% cotton, but we have several. We have lawn as well as poplin and chambray. Oh, it's got in some beautiful shades of chambray, even a pink. Hey Brenda, do you see that pink one? Pull that out and I'll show them. Is that carnation pink? Yeah. Um, so all of this is going to be 24% off. And the fun thing is the kits are already 20% off. So another 24% off for that. So here's the pink chambray that I think is just in the right? That's a beautiful shirting, especially if you want to make just a basic year-round shirt. If you're new and you want to make a shirt, this is a great fabric to start with. When you make your first shirt, please use the best quality shirting you can get. When you use a muslin or a very inexpensive fabric, the techniques cannot be accomplished as nicely. So when you get done, you don't feel quite that you've accomplished a good shirt or a good shirt technique, and you won't until you use a better fabric. It makes all the difference. So this would be good, and it comes in 4 different shades. I just thought I'd throw that out there. So the kits are a huge bargain. The shirting is as well as the patterns. If you have any questions, if you go to shop or you want to get some advice on where to start, or something more about the fabric, just let us know. Send us an email, islandersewing@comcast.net. Islandersewing@comcast.net. We answer every email. We don't always get to the phone calls right away. Yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
What is the difference between lawn and chambray?
Okay, the question that we have is the difference between lawn and chambray. Chambray is a very nice, firmly woven cotton. And it's what I would call a year-round weight or a mid-weight. A lawn is very tightly woven, but the yarns are extremely fine, which makes it even more breathable. We know cotton's breathable, but that lawn, they it began its popularity in Pakistan because how cool it is to wear. So it originated in that part of the world because of the heat. So that's what you want your lawn for. I don't wear my lawns in the winter. I don't because I get cold in the winter. I live in Michigan. So, but some people they're warm all year round. So maybe it would be a year round fabric for that person. Or you live in Arizona or Florida, you'll get a lot of use out of lawn. Okay, another question or no? Okay. All right. Now, I want to talk about that sale because we forgot to put the code in the newsletter. So here's the deal. The code is code 24. 24%. COD 24% sign. We'll post it, but it's going to take us a while to get the shirt kits on there. Do we have the shirting and the patterns on yet? No.
No.
Just wait till tomorrow. I think we'll have it done soon.
Yeah.
We'll make that a priority, get that done right away. So maybe give us an hour, you think? All right. Give us an hour after the program. And I know some of you are anxious to hear about the different things that we're going to have for sale that we didn't liquidate already. We started putting a few things on Etsy, right? Etsy. Etsy. So the Tibetan lamb skins are on Etsy, and the African mud cloth is on Etsy. So you can go take a look at those if you like. Um, we'll be posting some things on our website, some on Etsy, and we may put some on eBay. I don't know. We're just kind of feeling our way through it. But we've gotten rid of all the dress forms. I don't have any dress forms left, but you don't really want dress forms. Dress forms, you know what dress forms are good for? Dress forms are good for designing patterns on. And why you watch Islander Sewing Systems and a lot of other programs? Because you want to figure out how to make those patterns fit because they don't fit you. So the last thing you want is a dress form because you can't fit yourself on a dress form. That's why the patterns don't fit you. Dress forms were made specifically for garment production so that the manufacturers could do a 2, a 4, a 6, a 8, a 10, a 12 according to their own sizing. But they can't create enough patterns to fit us all because some of us have one shoulder longer than the other, one is higher than the other. Some of us have shoulders that go forward. Some of us have rounded backs, like myself. Some of us are very round in the derriere. Some of us don't have a derriere. That's me. So there's so many differences in your body that you wish you looked like the dress form. Oh man, do I wish I looked like the dress form, but we don't. Not to mention the proportions aren't right. So from the shoulder to the bust to the waist to the hip, chances of that being exact on anybody is 1 in 10 million. So anyway, no dress forms, but we have lots of other great stuff. We'll keep you posted, and we are going to do a slideshow of the camp shirt conversions, and we'll be posting that soon. Then,
Question.
oh, okay, another question.
What was the base pattern for the shirt behind you?
This one, I believe it is the sloper block for the designer shirt is called. So it's the sloper block that has darted. It's called the darted block. So that's the one I started with.
Oh, black and white. The black and white one, the coat.
Oh, that's the pattern that Brenda and I started a couple years ago, and we never got it into production. We may, it's, but no, we don't have that pattern. It's a long story to that one, but okay. All right, good. So take a look at the site. I've never had a sale this great before, so I think if you consider making shirts, this is a great time to take advantage of that sale. Shirts for Christmas. We even got some flannel shirting, and that is fabulous flannel, not like your box store flannel. This is good quality flannel that doesn't shrink. You don't even have to pre-wash it. Wonderful stuff. Anyway, what was I going to say more about that? Shirts. Oh, that on YouTube, we have several shirt making videos. So you want to take a look at those. And even if you didn't buy weren't making the specific pattern, you'll still learn a lot of our techniques on how to make a beautiful shirt or jacket without any pins or basting. That's what we do best around here. Besides making a few patterns and teaching a few classes, we're working on some fitting things, but we just enjoy everything to do with sewing. So we really appreciate you joining us today. And again, for those of you who hung in there, boy, thank you so much. It was really crazy here. So thank you. We'll see you again next month and watch for the newsletter next